If diplomacy keeps failing, could Tomahawk missiles and a green light from the White House change the course of the war for Ukraine and help it finally end Russia's illegal invasion? Plus, North Korea flexes its muscles, test firing an ICBM in advance of a presidential visit to the Korean Peninsula. And NASA's new ride takes flight, what the X-59 could mean for the future of supersonic air travel. Hello and welcome to Weapons and Warfare, a show made for people who want to know more about our national defense. Our goal is to help you have an informed conversation about what's happening with America's military. For Straight Arrow News, I'm your host, Ryan Robertson, and we start this week with the nuclear triad, originally conceived in the 1950s and implemented in the 1960s. The triad was created to guarantee the U.S. could carry out a second strike nuclear attack even if some of its nuclear capabilities were lost in an initial strike. But like every branch of the Department of Defense, the nuclear triad is in need of modernization, and that's the subject of this week's debrief.
I always thought just being ready is the point. That keeps the villain in check. Keeps the world straight. They see how prepared we are. No one starts a nuclear war.
The recently released Netflix thriller, A House of Dynamite, plays out a scenario people have worried about since the dawn of the nuclear age. A missile, armed with the ability to kill millions, headed towards the United States with no clear picture of who launched it. Now, Netflix definitely took some artistic liberties with the movie, following an established Hollywood pattern when it comes to movies like this, but the actual threat remains very real. So much so that at this year's Air, Space, and Cyber Conference, the Air Force Association gathered 3 generals and a senior executive from the defense industry to talk about what, in their opinions, the modernization of the nuclear triad needs to look like.
Our triad is what our nation needs to assure allies and deter potential aggressors that would threaten our homeland. And it's proven. It's proven over 5 decades that it works. Now we need to modernize it.
Quick recap in case you're wondering, what is the triad? It's America's nuclear deterrent. It's composed of land-based intercontinental ballistic missiles, or ICBMs, submarine-launched ballistic missiles, SLBMs, and long-range strategic bombers. Land, sea, and air, the backbone of America's national defense since the days of the Cold War.
The Cold War, to us, contextually, what we're facing now is vastly different. A lot of it is the mindset, but certainly it sets the stage so that you can maintain strategic advantage. And so, we see a lot of promise both in the programs of record, but also in the legacy systems that we have existing today.
Those programs of record General Parker mentioned are pretty significant. First up, the Northrop Grumman B-21 Raider, the eventual successor of the B-2 Spirit. With a buy of at least 100 aircraft, this long-range stealth bomber can deliver both conventional and nuclear munitions.
We know that, the capabilities that the B-21 will bring into the mix, especially as we talk about the more advanced defensive systems that we're seeing, we're really looking forward to this capability. And so at the end of the day, for General Cotton, he has to provide a range of options to the president in order to preserve the decision space for the president. And so the triad, in our view, remains the most effective, the best way to do that.
We now not just have 1, but 2 aircraft in the test program. And if you think about it, very advanced aircraft, very complicated aircraft built to production processes, performing exactly how we expected them to, which is really a testament to all the great work that was done in the model environment before we actually built those aircraft.
When it comes to the land-based element of the triad, some might be thinking, what's wrong with the Minuteman III? Unlike bombers and submarines, it's never actually been used. Why can't it keep doing the job? On the flip side of that argument, some might say the fact it's only ever been fired in testing is proof that it's done the job, providing deterrence for more than 55 years. And as Brigadier General William Buck Rogers points out, it's not just about what the Department of Defense is doing.
The adversary gets a vote. With this world changing, the requirements for an ICBM fleet may look different in the future and do look different. And that's where Sentinel comes in, right? We have to be more responsive to the threats when it comes to the land leg. So we need, and that doesn't include just head-on kinetic type threats. That includes things like cyber. So Sentinel, a core part of Sentinel is actually making sure that we are cyber secure, making sure that we bake cyber into that system and that we can defend it from not just, like I said, the traditional kinetic type of attack, but also cyber and non-kinetic attacks.
So when can taxpayers expect to see these next-gen ICBMs online and ready for duty? If a report from the Government Accountability Office is any indication, sometime in the 2050s. Various delays and cost overruns have plagued the program since the contract was awarded to Northrop Grumman in 2020. Despite the setbacks, though, Northrop Grumman's Ben Davies said things are moving along.
We've now had the opportunity to prototype and test every stage of the missile, and they very much performed as we expect them to, which gives us confidence as we push forward on the path to get that program into flight test.
Finally, the sea-based leg of the triad. While it's not exactly in their wheelhouse, the assembled Air Force flag officers all seemed to understand its importance.
The sea-based leg of the triad, right? It's the most survivable. Okay, and as we transition from Ohio class to Columbia class, we'll be guaranteed that advantage well for decades to come.
The new Columbia-class submarines, formerly known as the Ohio Replacement Submarine, is the U.S. Navy's next generation of nuclear-powered ballistic missile subs. The first of 12 anticipated Columbias is expected to be delivered in 2028 or 2029 and should be ready for service by 2031.
Time now for some headlines you may have missed. I'm joined now by senior producer and Air Force veteran Brett Baker. Brett, we just got done hearing about the modernization of the nuclear triad. I know a lot of folks have a lot of positions, but those nuclear weapons have provided the U.S. and our allies with relative peace for the last 60 plus years or so.
Absolutely. And just like anything, there's a time for change, and it's going to cost. It's not going to be a cheap process, but it's something that definitely probably needs to happen sooner rather than later.
You bet. You bet. All right, let's get to those headlines. It looks like Ukraine's war against Russia's illegal invasion is destined to enter a fourth year, and talk is growing about what it could mean for the cause if President Trump approved the delivery and use of Tomahawk missiles. Back in September, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky asked the U.S. to sell Tomahawks to European nations who would then in turn sell them to Ukraine or give them to Ukraine. Matthew Seville, the director of military sciences at the Royal United Services Institute, says that green light would be a welcome sign by NATO and Ukraine's European allies.
It's very much a material contribution that runs against some of the ways that the president has been talking about supporting Ukraine. I mean, he has made more US military equipment available to buy by European countries to give to Ukraine. But a donation like this would be actually the first major military support agreed by the Trump administration, as opposed to delivering weapons that had been previously approved by the Biden administration.
To this point, the president has denied Ukraine's requests for use of the long-range missiles, but is also growing frustrated with Russian President Vladimir Putin's refusal to reach a peace deal. Brett, Tomahawks would be a powerful weapon in Ukraine, no doubt. This whole conversation, though, reminds me of the talks around Abrams, F-16s, and these other deep strike weapons under the Biden administration.
Well, everything is a bargaining chip, and then depending on which way the wind is blowing that week, it's hard to know what the president is thinking in regards to, what kind of help he wants to give Ukraine or not. But definitely those would be, and we joke about the use of this word, a game changer
Sure.
for Ukraine. Um, so I hope that that's kind of something, because this thing needs to end at some point. And someone needs to make a move that's going to be decisive enough to force the other one's hand. And I hope it's Ukraine. That's what, I think the majority of the free world wants. And I certainly know it's what Europe wants. So it would be nice to see some action on that front for sure.
You bet. Yeah, every time the U.S. has deployed Tomahawks, it's always been a decisive move. We saw Tomahawks being deployed. Part of the strike against the Iranian nuclear sites, there was a bunch of Tomahawks deployed from submarines in that strike. And so submarines from Ukraine would be able to strike pretty much anything in Russia. And there's enough mass there. Like, Ukrainians can make some deep strike weapons of their own, and they are. But they don't have the mass yet, because pretty much everything that they make, as soon as it comes off the line, it's being shot. So, to your point, hopefully the Ukrainians get that extra piece of the puzzle to tip the scales in their favor. All right, speaking of missiles, in advance of President Trump's visit to South Korea last month, their neighbors to the north said they recently conducted successful cruise missile tests, the latest display of its military capabilities. North Korea's official news agency said the sea-to-surface missiles flew for more than 2 hours before accurately striking targets in its western waters. Brett, Rocket Man is gonna Rocket Man, I suppose.
Absolutely. One of the only real kind of like intel I can bring to this is my experience. I was stationed at Osan Air Base in South Korea, 1990 to 91. And back then, his father was in charge, but we called it saber rattling.
Sure.
It's a lot of just making noise to make noise, so that they don't forget you're there, I suppose. I don't think any of us. Yes, they are to be taken seriously. How serious is the threat? I, I I have to think that they know that they may have the upper hand in anything that if they were to strike first, but that would not last long. So it's not in their best interest to actually do anything. But making noise and making people, oh, well, what are they up to now, does seem to be their game.
Right. Right. I mean, it's kind of what they do, right? To your point, South Korea, they've always had this enemy at the north. They've been prepared constantly, fight tonight kind of mentality across the country. So yeah, to your point, North Koreans might be able to, yes, you got to take them seriously. They are a nuclear armed country, but any kind of opening volley would be probably North Korea's only volley. If you game it out. So. All right, finally, NASA's X-59, a supersonic but quiet jet, soared over the Southern California desert in late October in the first test flight of the experimental aircraft. The X-59 was built and designed by Lockheed Martin to break the sound barrier with little noise, possibly paving the way for faster commercial air travel. The sleek-looking jet, and it does look very sleek, took off from a runway at Lockheed's Skunk Works facility in Palmdale, California, about 60 miles north of Los Angeles. The X-59 is designed to break the sound barrier with a sonic thump rather than a boom. It's touted to be able to cruise at Mach 1.4 at an altitude of 55,000 feet. And Brett might make the hop over the pond a little quicker. I got to imagine the price of fuel for that thing, though, it's going to be ridiculous. So quicker flight, probably not a cheaper flight.
That is most doubtly a fact. I think the real interesting application, kind of the reason why I picked that story is eventually that's going to find its way into the military, I have to believe, if this is a successful venture. Obviously, it would be great because, for the most part, supersonic flight over the U.S. is largely banned. But I have to think that at some point, if it works, that's going to be something that comes towards the military's way.
Sure. I want to know, at what level does a thump become a boom? Is there like an intermediary, right? Like the sonic thump. Is there a sonic crack in between thump and boom? A sonic slap? I don't know. I'm gonna have to find a supersonic, hypersonic like engineer and talk about that. So, all right, Brett, really appreciate it as always. We'll see you next week.
See you next week.
Just like UAVs and UGVs come in all different shapes and sizes, so do UUVs, unmanned underwater vehicles. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about this Toloka 1000 behind me with a gentleman from the company. We're not going to show his face for security reasons, but just want to say thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, thank you. It's a great opportunity. Thank you.
So the Toloka 1000, it looks like a submarine, basically just one giant unmanned torpedo.
Well, it's actually more like a sort of unmanned submarine, so there is no crew, but it can do all the stuff that submarine does. It has even diesel engine on it, so it's like old-style diesel-electric submarine, but high autonomous. It can connect to the internet while it's on the surface and send all the data it has acquired during the mission, and can perform long-term missions up to 3 months or even half a year, depending on the fuel capacity and the battery capacity.
Okay, so that's good clarification there. It's not necessarily a strike vehicle.
It can be a strike vehicle, but it also can be a reconnaissance vehicle. It can perform demining operations, mining operations, serve as sleeping mine. You know, when it detects acoustically someone, it can go right to the target. It has optical, thermal, and acoustic targeting systems. We have a sort of Shazam for ships, where we can measure by analyzing the acoustic signature, define what type of ship it is, and even in some cases define what model of ship it is.
Shazam for ships. That's a good term. That's a good term. As far as where it's made and stuff, built here in Ukraine?
Yeah, it's built in Ukraine, but we use companies from all over the world, components.
You bet. In this show, I mean, obviously we're trying to attract some international investment, maybe some international customers. Have you had any folks from outside of Ukraine stop by and kind of question you guys about what you got?
Yeah, it's quite prominent here. Like everybody sees a big sub and wants to know something about it. And we talked to some companies that are also in naval field. We also talked to military officers of European countries and also in US. So there are plenty of interest for low-cost underwater sea effectors. And what we do in Ukraine is basically low-cost, low-tech, but highly
effective.
Highly effective, and so we are good in implementing software, but the hardware is not so sophisticated.
Makes sense.
It's augmented low-tech, if you can say so.
Now, this is the Toloka 1000. How long is it?
It's exactly to fit in a standard 20-foot container.
But you also make different varieties of unmanned underwater vehicles.
Yeah. We have three base models. One is something like 1.5 to 2.5 meters, fully electric, with a range up to 100 kilometers and the payload up to 15 kilos. The other one is the middle one with the payload up to 500 kilos and the range up to 1,200 kilometers. And this one has a range up to 2,000 kilometers and a payload up to 5 tons.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us today. Really appreciate your time.
You're welcome. Thank you.
All right, for our comms check this week, we were checking back in with our friends over at Red Cat to find out, what's going on with their Black Widow drone. Here to talk a little bit more about that is Stan Nowak with Red Cat, talking about the Black Widow. Stan, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Yeah.
So last year, we kind of introduced our audience to the Black Widow and its mission sets. Kind of, fill us in on what's happened since then.
Well, what's interesting is that we've been able to, not only be the program winner for the Short Range Reconnaissance Program for the U.S. Army, but now we are actually in the NSPA catalog for the European Union and NATO. And that's a huge deal for us. That opens up a lot of doors to work with those frontline forces that are essentially going up against Russia as well along the Ukrainian border. So
right.
we're here for our allied partners, we're here for our coalition partners, and Black Widow really is going to be the program of choice for a lot of those countries over there.
And it seems like it's kind of opened up some doors for you in some other areas as well. And really, you know, the last year, Black Cat's really expanded in other domains beside the air. There were some USVs that you're also rolling out. Kind of talk about that as well.
Sure, yeah. I mean, so when I was brought on board on Red Cat about 3 years ago, our mission was to become an all-domain company. That's exactly why I was positioning it for the last 3 years. And we've now done that, right? We just unveiled a new division called Blue Ops, which is our maritime division, solely focused on uncrewed surface vessels. But really, the thread to pull for an all-domain operations is that all these things are going to be integrated together. So imagine swarms of boats holding swarms of our aerial assets. When you're starting to look at the next great conflict, which is going to be a completely different battlefield environment than Ukraine, we're talking about island chains. We're talking about hundreds of miles. You need delivery systems for these small drones because they're very limiting factors, right, from range and endurance. Well, let's get them close to the fight. Let's use larger fixed-wing aircraft and do marsupial deployment as well as then uncrewed surface vessels to actually get these things closer to the fight.
And I wanted to bring up the marsupial development, so I'm glad that you did. You just mentioned, fixed-wing aircraft dropping stuff, but there's also unmanned surface vehicles that can be marsupial because they're going to launch other things. Kind of talk about how you're trying to really, develop out this marsupial drone inside of a drone concept.
Well, so we've been working with a hive company for a while called Sentient Robotics, and that started, again, give us these ideas of deploying a massive amount of aerial assets from uncrewed surface vessels and, again, from the fixed-wing assets as well. When you start to look at even the U.S. Army, we are in the SRR echelon, but if you're looking at MRR and LRR, the fact that we have an advantage because we're the smaller stuff, we can actually be integrated into those larger systems. And that's really where all this is going, is all these echelons starting to work together so that the U.S. Army and other coalition forces can take advantage of these integrated systems and deploying these small drones for much larger drones. And the same for the uncrewed surface vessels, right? It's how far can I go? Let's just say I'm getting towards a beachhead and I need to form a control point in an area. Well, I can send these drones as opposed to people and keep people out of harm's way. And everything's being operated from the rear. So that's really where it's all headed.
And that's how you're integrating into the Army's MRR program, the medium range reconnaissance, is through that kind of integration. Is that correct?
Yeah. So you're going to start to look at the other echelons actually holding our either Black Widow systems or our FANG systems and being able to then be deployed from underwing. Again, being able to go a lot further than we can go just under our average drones, and then being deployed, but they're all retrievable. That's what's great. They can be attritable, but they can also be retrievable.
Yeah. Really appreciate your time today, Stan. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks so much. Yep.
All opinions expressed in this segment are solely the opinions of the contributors.
All right, folks, that's going to do it for us this week on Weapons and Warfare. But before we bug out, I want to highlight a hero from Mississippi. Jessica Bond was sleeping at her home with her 2 kids in the house when her son woke to the sound of their dogs barking at something in the yard. Her son tried to grab video of the animal, but
he said, "I can't get a clear shot." He said, "But it's the monkey." So I said, "Oh snap! Let me get my phone and let me get my gun. Let me call the police and stuff."
The monkey she's referring to was part of a lab experiment at Tulane University's Research Center. The 40-pound primate was described as aggressive and escaped after the semi-truck carrying it crashed on the interstate.
I'm not going to take my chances with my baby versus infected animal. So I did what any mother would do, and I got out and I shot at the monkey.
That's right, Bond. Jessica Bond wasn't going to wait around and see what this escaped dangerous animal would do. She embraced her Second Amendment rights and took out an immediate threat to her family. As a former farm kid from Nebraska who had to grab a gun a time or two to protect myself and our property, I just have to say, bravo Zulu, Miss Bond. Your kids are lucky to have a mom like you. And that's going to do it for us this week on Weapons and Warfare. As always, if you like what you saw and or heard, please like and subscribe to our social media feeds and download the Straight Arrow News app today. That really is the best way to get all of the great content that SAN puts out. So, until next time, for senior producer Brett Baker, video editor Brian Spencer, and motion artist Dakota Patillo, I'm Ryan Robertson for Straight Arrow News, signing off.